So, welcome to the presentation, Creating Silver Linings, How to Find and Capture Opportunity. We all know that uncertainty is a feature of our world, sadly, but it seems to be something that we have to get used to. I like this picture because it talks about, or it shows us question marks raining down on us from everywhere. And whenever we're trying to make progress, we always seem to be confronted with yet another question. And uncertainty is a feature of life as we find it, both in business and in projects and everywhere else. The question is, how do you feel when you face an uncertain future? A lot of people, when they think about future uncertainty, they think that uncertainty is dangerous, it's worrying, it's something we need to be very, very, very careful about. We need to protect against all forms of uncertainty. And we feel a little bit nervous and anxious in the presence of uncertainty because we think that uncertainty is dangerous. There is an alternative view, which is to say, actually, uncertainty is not dangerous, but it is challenging. It's something that we could embrace and engage with, and we could be brave in the face of uncertainty and face the future, rolling our sleeves up, ready to see what we can do in the light of things being uncertain. And how you feel about uncertainty, whether you think it's dangerous or challenging, whether you want to try and be very careful or you want to be very brave in the light of uncertainty, it's not right or wrong. Different people have different responses. But it is important to recognize that we have those different feelings when we're confronted with an uncertain future. And maybe our feelings might not be the best guide to how we should approach an uncertain future. It's true that uncertainty characterizes the environment that we're working in at all levels and from multiple sources. So we might find technical uncertainty and management uncertainty, commercial and external uncertainty expressed in our risk breakdown structure, for example. And we also have multiple levels of uncertainty, starting at the highest level of our business and our strategy, where we need to take risk in order to gain reward. What we need to do is take the right risks and take the right risks safely. When we come down from the strategic level into our portfolio and program level, there's uncertainty in making sure that we're doing the right thing, choosing between different options and different ways of proceeding, as well as doing the things that we choose in the right way through our planning and execution, change control, and so on. And then, of course, when we get right the way down to the bottom level, to the execution level with projects and operations, that's where risk certainly starts to bite, where we're going to be affected by uncertainty in all the different aspects of the working environment. And zero risk at the project level is not possible. All projects are risky because of the way that they're structured. We're taking risk on behalf of our clients, but actually zero risk is also not desirable. We want to be able to take risk because risk allows us to do things that haven't been done before as we move forward into that uncertain future. And at the project and operational level, we also have to manage that risk-reward balance at this level as well as at the strategic level. So we find that uncertainty and risk are everywhere throughout our working environment, from the highest level of business and strategy through portfolios and programs down to execution, projects and operations. And when we're talking about risk, it's important that we have a clear concept, a clear definition in our mind of what we mean by risk. A lot of people, they have these kinds of images in their minds. We're thinking about big bad things that confront us that could squash us and be really painful, things where we're targeted. There seems to be a target painted on our heads where everybody's aiming at us if we're the project manager or a program manager, and it's quite a dangerous place to be, or just something undefined out there in the water just waiting to get us. And this is often the kind of concept that we have, the kind of feeling we have in our minds when we think about risk. I'd like to suggest to you that this is actually not an accurate or a complete concept of risk. And it's a problem because it shapes the way that we act towards risk if we think in this particular way. So I want to start with very first principles with defining risk and understanding where risk comes from. In the first couple of minutes of the presentation, we've already used two different words, but they're related. We've talked about uncertainty in the future, and we've talked about risk in the working environment. But how do risk and uncertainty relate to each other? They're not the same. All risks are uncertain, but not all uncertainties are risks. There are millions of uncertainties in the world, but we don't write them all down in our risk register. We somehow filter the huge world of uncertainty, and we pick a subset of uncertainties to record as risks, to think about, to try and understand, to try and manage, to communicate about. So how do we decide which is the subset of uncertainties that we're going to treat as risks? And there's lots of different ways of doing this, but I like to use three simple words to provide a filter of the big world of uncertainty to decide which uncertainties are risks. And I use these three words. Risk is uncertainty that matters, because most of the uncertainties in the world don't matter. We just don't care about them. Which are the uncertainties that do matter? The uncertainties that matter are the ones that could affect our objectives. So any uncertainty that has the potential to influence whether or not we can achieve our objectives effectively is an uncertainty we need to know about. We need to record, we need to assess and analyze, we need to respond to and communicate about. We need to manage. And so those uncertainties that matter, the ones that can affect our objectives, are the ones that we define as risk. So if we try and turn that into a formal definition, we need to have a definition of risk that connects uncertainty with objectives. And that's what we find in places like the ISO standard, ISO 31000 Risk Management Guidelines, very elegantly says risk is the effect of uncertainty on objectives. Or if we want something which is more focused on the world of projects, and we look at PMI, in the PMI lexicon of project management terms, we find this definition: an uncertain event or condition that, if it occurs, affects an objective. So we see very clearly in the formal definitions, and you'll find this elsewhere in APM and in COSO and other definitions. It's about linking together the effect of uncertainty on objectives. But there's something interesting in all these standards which broadens our view of risk when we're thinking about what kind of uncertainty and what kind of effect we're actually interested in. So, for example, the ISO standard has a footnote. It says, yes, risk is the effect of uncertainty on objectives, but effect is defined as deviation from the expected, which could be either positive or negative, or both. PMI says that risk is an uncertain event or condition, if or negative effect on an objective, which tells us that there are two flavors, two types of risk in these definitions. There are good risks and bad risks, upside and downside, positive and negative. And we call upside risks opportunities. An opportunity is uncertain and it matters. It may never happen, but if it does happen, it helps us to achieve our goals. And a threat is a risk because it's an uncertainty that matters. It might never occur, but if the threat occurs, it matters because it could cost us time and money and performance and reputation. So what we're finding is that there are two types of impact that matter. If we think about risk as having those two dimensions of the uncertainty and its effect on objectives, we tend to use these words probability and impact to describe what we mean or how big the risk is. We think about the uncertainty in terms of probability or frequency or likelihood or chance. We think about the effect on objectives described as impact or effect or consequence or result. And what we're trying to do when we're sizing our risk is to combine these two dimensions. But it's important to remember that we're not only concerned with negative effects. So in this funny little picture that I found of the mouse and the cheese and the trap, the mouse is like a project manager facing risks in his project. And of course, he's aware of the negative risks. He could be killed or injured. He's seen the trap. And in response to that, he's put his helmet on and he's going very, very carefully. And of course, we need to do that in our projects. We need to see the traps, which could cost extra time, waste money, damage performance or reputation or safety. And we need to protect ourselves and go very carefully. But there's another uncertainty that the mouse is facing, which is really important. It really is an uncertainty that matters. It's the uncertainty of whether he can get the cheese out of the trap. And he has to manage both kinds of uncertainties at the same time. Get the cheese out and don't be killed or injured. If he gets the cheese, but he's injured in the process, he's failed. Or if he doesn't spring the trap and he's not injured, but he doesn't get the cheese, he's failed. And we need to do the same with our projects. We need to make sure that things don't go wrong. We don't walk into traps that are threats to our project, which could cost us time or money or reputation and so on. But we also need to get the cheese out of the project. So what does cheese mean in our projects? Cheese means benefits. Cheese means value. Cheese means products and services that people want and need. Cheese is what we're trying to get out of the project, which is not guaranteed. There's no certainty that we can create value or benefits out of our projects. That's why we need project management. And what we're trying to do in risk management is to get the cheese out, create value and benefits through our projects, whilst at the same time minimizing the threats so that we don't waste time and money or damage reputation and performance. And what we're trying to do through risk management is to find the most effective way of getting the cheese without springing the trap. And sometimes there's a better way than the way we've been doing it so far. So what we see here is when we think about uncertainty that matters, or probability and impact, we need to be concerned about uncertainties that could help us achieve our goals, as well as uncertainties that could harm us. If there are uncertainties that could help us work faster, smarter, cheaper, of course we need to see these and proactively chase them down and try and capture them. It would be irresponsible or unprofessional of us if there were things that we could do or things that we could capture or explore that would help our project be more successful and we just ignored them. Of course, we need to proactively chase down things that will help us achieve our goals, as well as looking out for those things that could hurt our progress. So both of these types of uncertainty matter. Both of them need to be managed, and both of them qualify as risks because they are uncertainties that matter. So managing risk has a dual purpose. The purpose is not only to prevent potential problems and stop things going wrong, but it's also to find potential benefits, to find ways of working faster, smarter, cheaper that will help us achieve goals in the best possible way. So what we're concerned about is not just threats, but also opportunities. And in our definition of risk, and in our thinking about risk, and in our practice towards risk in risk management, we need to be thinking about both opportunities and threats, upside and downside, positive and negative. So how are we going to do that? Forward-looking radar that scans the future, that looks out for things that are coming in our direction and gives us early warning so that we have the opportunity to respond in advance. And sometimes we see big bad things that are coming towards us very fast, and that gives us the chance with our radar to spot it, to move out of the way, or to erect some kind of protection. And that's how we manage threats. But we also might spot on our radar some really good thing which is moving slowly towards us, and if we don't change our position or our approach, it might just pass us by. And having seen it, we can adjust our project so that we step in front of the risk and capture it and exploit it to create benefits for our projects. The forward-looking radar should be tuned to find both bad things and good things, giving us time to respond in order to miss the bad things and capture the good things. So the purpose of risk management is to opportunities. And some organizations try and do this through two separate processes. But if threats and opportunities are both different types of risk, then risk management should be able to address both threats and opportunities together. After all, they are both types of risk. So we should be able to construct a single integrated risk management process which minimizes threats and maximizes opportunities at the same time in a common process. And I'd like to spend the next 15 or 20 minutes talking about how we might do that. So here is a typical generic risk management process. You might use slightly different names for these different phases or steps, but the steps are common. We start off with some kind of initiation step or planning step, risk management planning, establishing the context for our process, understanding what our objectives are, setting the scope of risk management, deciding our frequency of responses, our reporting requirements, what stakeholders we're involving, an initiation step. Then we move into a cycle which involves identifying risks, finding to prioritize them through a qualitative looking at probabilities and impacts. We may want to use quantitative risk modeling to look at the combined effect of risks on achievement of objectives. And once we know which are the big risks and the ones that really matter, then we develop responses and implement them and see how they work. And then we go around the cycle again. What now are the risks that matter? Which are now the big ones? And what should we do about it? And this process works equally well for opportunities as for threats. So in risk identification, we could not only look for the bad things that might hurt us, we could look for the good things that could help us. They're not all equally important, so we need to prioritize and find the best opportunities. And then we might model their effect on the project's objectives. And once we've found the best opportunities, we want to find. So there's the same process that works for both threats and opportunities. And I want to just focus on three of these steps now, because these are the ones that perhaps are the most different in the way that we think. How do we find those opportunities? How do we prioritize them? and how do we respond to them effectively and proactively. So let's focus on each of these 3 steps in the risk management process in turn. And with the time that we have, I can only look at this in summary, but the is out there, and I'll give you a couple at the end of the presentation that you might want to chase up and find more detail. So how do we find opportunities? Remember, opportunities are positive risks. They are uncertainties that matter, things that may or may not occur, but if they do occur, they have a positive effect on achievement of objectives. Now, the problem with our English language is it is quite flexible. So we can use this word opportunity in different ways. For example, we might talk about an opportunity to succeed. It's important that we see that risk opportunities are not the benefits. It's not achieving some benefit or deliverable or value for our clients or stakeholders. That's the benefit that the project is trying to achieve. What we're looking for is an uncertainty that would help us achieve that benefit in the best possible way. So we're not looking for the benefit, which is the outcome of the project. We're looking for uncertainties that could affect how we achieve those benefits. We're also not looking for the opportunity to act. We have the opportunity of subcontracting. We have the opportunity of recruiting good people. No, those are things that we choose to do. They are not certainties that might or might not occur. They are choices. So responses are not risk opportunities either. And it's also important to see that opportunities are not scope creep. They're not the opportunity to do something else. Or we could also add this functionality and serve this additional customer base. No, that's scope creep. We're talking about opportunities being uncertainties that help us achieve these objectives, the current objectives of our current project. So maybe we might look at some other words or phrases that would describe the sorts of opportunities we're looking for, like a nice surprise. Wow, who thought that could happen? I didn't know that could happen, and I'm really pleased it did. Or something you imagine in your dreams, assuming that you have good dreams and not nightmares. The nightmares would be the threats, of course. So what we're looking for is uncertainties that matter. And in that sense, opportunities are the same as threats. They are both uncertainties that matter. The only difference between opportunities and threats is the sign of the impact. Opportunities have positive impacts, threats have negative impacts. And if they're both uncertainties that matter, if they both are the same kind of thing, maybe we could use the same techniques to identify them. Now, that's a possibility. We could consider using brainstorming or workshops or questionnaires or interviews or checklists. Maybe we might use our common risk identification techniques to find threats. Well, we could, but there are problems with that approach. The problem is that most of our common techniques are focused on finding threats. The way we think about it in the sort of habits that we bring to our risk workshops and our risk questionnaires. Some of the techniques are limited as well in specifically focusing on finding downside things. So we could just try and really hard to use the existing techniques to kind of bend them to find opportunities as well as threats. Or instead of that, what we could do is look for specific identification techniques which find both threats and opportunities. We might call these two-dimensional risk identification techniques. And there are quite a lot of these. There's actually about a dozen. But let me just mention 3 of them, which are perhaps most common and most easy to implement. Two-dimensional risk identification techniques that will find both threats and opportunities together in a common technique. And we can use these in our risk workshops, in our brainstorms, in our interviews and questionnaires and so on. Which is the first technique that you can think of that would find both opportunities and threats in a common technique? The clue is in the name, SWOT analysis. O stands for opportunities, T stands for threats. And so we can use SWOT analysis, not just at the strategic level, not just at the level of marketing or of innovation, but we can also use SWOT analysis at the level of projects and programs. We can say, what are our strengths and what are our weaknesses, and what might that mean for our project? Because we're great at this in this particular strength, what opportunity could that create for our project? Because we've got a problem with this particular thing, what threats might that pose as we move forward on the project? So we can use SWOT analysis to, in parallel, find both threats and opportunities. It's built into, it's integral in the technique. Another technique that we could use, which is double-sided, is examining our assumptions and constraints. Very often we do assumptions analysis and constraints analysis looking for bad things. Now, what if this thing we assumed turned out not to be true? But we could also think about things that we assume are good, things that we assume, sorry, are bad. You know, this subcontractor always delivers late. Yeah, but what if they don't? Yeah, we always have relations problems with this particular type of project. Yeah, but what if it didn't happen? What positive things might we find by testing our assumptions, testing our constraints, and seeing which ones might not be valid, might not be reliable, which ones might be flaky, and then might offer us an opportunity to do something better. Another possibility is using the idea of fault tree analysis, where we look at things that could go wrong and examine what might lead to that fault. We can have an upside fault tree analysis and call it a benefit tree analysis. We might think about the benefit of delivering early or delivering additional functionality and say, yes, but how could that happen? What uncertainties might lead to an early delivery or saving time and money? And so we can use that same sort of decomposition approach that we use for a fault tree, but with an upside looking at a benefits tree. And these and other techniques are two-dimensional techniques that are specifically focused on finding opportunities alongside threats in a common technique. And there are many others. The key thing with trying to identify techniques is the way that we think. The biggest limitation finding opportunities is not the technique, it's not the interviews or the workshop, it's not the way that we approach things, it's in our heads. If we only think that risks are negative, then of course that's all we're going to look for and that's all we're going to find. What we need to do is to think outside the box, be creative and innovative in our thinking, and try and imagine things that could go better than we'd already planned. And thinking outside the box sometimes gets a little bit messy. Sometimes senior management don't like us to think outside the box because it creates all sorts of things that we hadn't previously thought of. And sometimes it's better to just stay within the confines of our existing approach. But that way, we'd never do anything new. We'd never have any fun. We'd never be creative or innovative if we always just stayed in the box. So maybe we should think outside the box, even if it does get a little bit messy at times. So we can use creative thinking to think outside the box with two-dimensional identification techniques, looking for positive uncertainties that matter alongside the negative ones, finding opportunities to work faster, smarter, cheaper, uncertain things that may or may not occur, but if they do occur, they help us achieve our goals in the best possible way. Now, when we find these opportunities, some of them will be stupid, some of them will be crazy, some of them would never happen, and some of them will be golden opportunities that are really worth picking up and pursuing. How do we prioritize our opportunities? Because opportunities are the same as threats, the only difference is the sign of the impact, we should be able to use the same prioritization techniques for opportunities that we use for threats. And the primary technique that we tend to use is the probability impact, a two-dimensional matrix which allows us to plot how likely the uncertainty is to occur on a probability or frequency or likelihood axis, and if it did occur, what it would do to our objectives on the impact or effect or consequence axis. And then we have a red, yellow, green traffic light system where the red ones are very likely to occur with a very big impact. Those are our top priority risks. The green ones are unlikely or they have a very small impact. Those are our low priority risks. And we're probably very familiar with this kind of heat map. It might not be a 5x5, maybe you use a 3x3 or a 4x4. Maybe the shapes of the zones are a little bit different. It doesn't really matter. The principle is we define our scales, we say what we mean by high, medium, and low probability, what we mean on this project by high, medium, and low impact. Having defined our scales, we rank the risks using this green traffic light system, and we can prioritize the red ones as our top priority. I'm sure you're familiar with this. How do we do that for opportunities? What would it mean to prioritize opportunities on a red, yellow, green probability impact matrix? One way to think about it is to have a double matrix, which has negative impacts on one side and positive impacts on the other side. So threats are uncertainties that matter because they could waste time, waste money, damage reputation, damage safety, damage performance. Opportunities are uncertainties that matter because if they occur, they would have a positive impact, save time, save money, enhance performance. We could rank our opportunities in the same way that we rank our threats, by saying the ones that we want to look out for are the ones to happen with a really big positive impact. So if they're likely to happen, they're easy to get. And if they have a big positive impact, they're really helpful. Those have to be the best golden opportunities. And opportunities which have a low probability, they probably won't happen, or a low impact. If they do happen, they don't help us very much. Those are our lowest priorities. So we have the same kind of idea of opportunities and threats prioritized using probability and impact with the same kind of traffic light system. And so we could actually plot threats on one side of a double matrix and the other, and use the same prioritization approach to find the best opportunities that we find to pick out the worst threats. Well, there's one small refinement that you might see with this double probability impact matrix, and that is to switch over the opportunity side, to kind of flip it over to create what we might matrix. And the idea here is that we go low to high negative impact, and then high to low positive impact. As we flip over the opportunity side, it brings the two red zones together into the center, which creates a kind of focus place, an attention, an arrow of attention, which says now in the middle of this diagram, we have the worst threats and the best opportunities brought together. And so we can focus on the middle of the diagram first, because that will tell us the really bad threats, high probability of occurring and a really bad impact, and the best possible opportunities, a high chance of happening and a really good impact. And we start in the middle of the diagram. We focus in the middle, and then if we have time and energy and effort available, we can work our way out to the edges. So this kind of matrix, this mirror matrix, is a way of prioritizing threats and opportunities together in a single technique, a single map, which shows the best ones in the middle and the ones which are lowest priority on the outside. And so then what we can do is put zones into our matrix in the same way that we would for threats. The best opportunities have a high chance of happening, and they have a big positive impact. Because they have a high chance of occurring, they have a big impact, they're really helpful. So this needs to be our top priority. Easy to capture, huge benefit, let's go and get them. Our second priority will be the ones below those, which also have a high possible benefit, but they're a little bit harder to get. The probability is lower. They're worth exploring. Are there ways we can think of that will improve the probability of this opportunity occurring so that we can get that big benefit money, that big enhancement in performance, that big reduction in safety impacts? So our second priority is those which have impact, but a lower probability of occurrence. Our third priority area in this PI matrix is the ones in the top right-hand corner. Again, they're easy to get hold of, so we probably should consider looking at them because they're quick wins, they're easy, but the benefit is a little bit lower. And then the ones at the bottom corner, which have a low probability and they're not really very helpful, but we perhaps needn't even bother looking at those. So we can prioritize by using the same PI matrix, the same two-step approach to saying how likely is it and what would happen if it occurred, plotting it on a traffic light red, yellow, green system, and picking out the best ones by seeing the zone of the PI matrix or the heat map that the opportunities sit in. So it's exactly the same technique that we use for threats. We're just doing it on the positive side, on the upside, looking for the best ones. Okay, once we've prioritized our opportunities, we found some really good opportunities that we want to chase down. How are we going to make them happen? What responses should we consider? When we're thinking about response strategies, there are 5 common strategies that we might think of. And in your heads, if I said to you, just give me the names of some risk response strategies, these are the sorts of things that maybe you might come up. You don't often think of. This one is perhaps often overlooked. It's the escalation strategy. If you find a risk that doesn't belong to you, it's not part of your project, it doesn't affect one of your objectives, but it could affect somebody else, hope they find it as well, we escalate the risk to the person who would own it because they own the objectives that would be affected. And that might be another project, another program, another department, another part of the organization. It might even be the board and senior management. If we identify risks that don't belong to us because they can't affect our objectives, we could pass them to people who they do belong to because they could. So the escalation strategy is about passing risk to the right part of the organization where it belongs. Once we've escalated risks away that don't belong to us, there are 4 more strategies that we can use for risks that do belong to us. And you might have thought of risk avoidance, where we're trying to remove the uncertainty, or you might have thought of risk transfer, where we're getting somebody else involved to help us manage the risk and take it away for us. You might have thought of risk reduction or risk mitigation, where we're trying to reduce the size of the risk exposure so that we make it acceptable, something we can cope with. And the last one is one that we really do often forget, that's risk acceptance, where residual risk that's left over after we've avoided, transferred, or reduced as much as we can. So these are the sorts of things that people generally think of. The problem with these common strategies is that they don't work for opportunities. These are all threat-focused responses. Who wants to avoid or transfer or reduce an opportunity? That's the wrong thinking. Same as threats, they only differ in the sign of the impact. There should be opportunity equivalents to these 5 strategies, which do the same kind of thing, but just do it in a positive or upside way. So if we generalized the threat responses, the threat strategies, to see what they're doing in general terms, we could do the same sort of thing for an upside risk. So what are these 5 threat strategies trying to do? The generic action out of a threat strategy of escalation is passing the risk to the person it belongs to. And we could do exactly the same for an opportunity. We could just pass that risk on to somebody else. Who is the right person to own this opportunity? It sounds good, but it's not for us. It doesn't belong to our activities. But what about avoidance? What is threat avoidance trying to do? Threat avoidance is about removing uncertainty. And we do that when we're faced with a threat, if we want to try and avoid it, by reducing the probability to 0, make it impossible for the threat to happen. Then we've eliminated the uncertainty, the threat is avoided, it can't happen, and we're protected. What would we do for an opportunity? What's the equivalent for an opportunity to eliminate uncertainty? We don't want to make the probability 0. We don't want to make it impossible for the opportunity to happen, but we want to aggressively remove. We can do that not by making the probability 0, but by trying to make the probability 100%, by making it certain. We eliminate the uncertainty, making the opportunity happen, by taking decisions and actions which exploit or capture the opportunity. We have an aggressive response which would kill the threat or capture the opportunity, make it happen. Now, there aren't very many threats that we can completely avoid and kill. And in the same way, there aren't very many opportunities that we can capture or exploit and make them happen. But there are some, and it's the best possible response. If we can kill a threat or capture an opportunity and gain the benefit, we should look for that response strategy first. Where we can't completely avoid a threat, there might be somebody else who could avoid it for us, or who could manage it better than we can. And that's where threat transfer is required, where we're involving other people to take the bad thing away. And we might have to pay them. So we have some kind of insurance or some kind of subcontract where somebody else takes the bad thing away and we pay them. What would the equivalent be for an opportunity? If we have a good thing that could help our project, we just can't manage it ourselves. We could share that opportunity, getting somebody else to help us, and we might have to pay them to do it. We might have to share some of the benefit, but a sharing response is the equivalent to a transfer response. Transfer, you pay someone to take the bad thing away. Sharing, you pay someone to bring the good thing in, involving other people in the management of the opportunity. What about threat reduction or mitigation? Threat reduction looks to change the size of the threat by reducing its probability or reducing the severity of the impact. We could change the size of an opportunity, but we'd want to grow the opportunity or enhance it, make the probability higher. It's more likely for this opportunity to occur, and making the potential impact bigger. It's even better for us. And so we're looking to enhance or grow the opportunity. Threat reduction is reducing it, making it smaller. Threat enhancement is making it bigger, changing the size of the risk. And then that last strategy, if there's nothing proactive we can do for the threat, we just accept it, we build it into the baseline, we have a contingency plan or a backup plan if the thing actually occurs and goes wrong. We could do exactly the same for an opportunity. If we can't manage it proactively, but we spotted something that could help us, we could build it into the backup fallback plan or a fall forward plan, we might say, a contingency plan. If the good thing happens, what will we do? So we've got an acceptance strategy. So in the same way that we have generic strategies to deal with threats, we can choose one of the strategies and then implement it on our threats. We can also have the same set of generic strategies for our opportunities, choose one and then implement it to manage the threat proactively and manage the opportunity proactively. It's the same sort of thinking, it's just upside thinking instead of downside thinking. There is, of course, another possibility, which is just to say, well, we'll bury our head in the sands and pretend nothing's going to happen. That might be all right for threats, and hopefully it will pass us by. But what about the opportunity? Maybe we should just poke our heads up from time to time and just say, is there something worth looking at? These are not very good responses, are they? We don't want to be ostriches, even optimistic ostriches. There are better things that we can do to manage our risks proactively through the use of one of five proactive response strategies. For threats, we have escalate, avoid, transfer, reduce, or accept. For opportunities, we have escalate, exploit, share, incept. The same parallel response strategies are possible. Okay, and when we get to this point in the risk process, of course, we often think we've finished, we've developed our response strategies, but we haven't finished. And I just want to remind you that the risk process with developing responses. And to illustrate this, here's a simple riddle that you might have heard before. It's called the frogs on the log riddle. And it goes like this. There are five, I can't count. There are 5 frogs sitting on the log and 4 decide to jump off. So how many frogs are on the log? And the answer, of course, is if there are 5 frogs sitting on the log and 4 decide to jump off, there are still 5 frogs on the log, because deciding is not doing. If you decide to jump off, but you don't actually jump, then nothing changes. And the problem with risk management is that very often we get to the stage of identifying, prioritizing, and developing responses, record it in the risk register, and do nothing. We don't actually jump. We don't implement our response until we've jumped, until we've taken the action that we decided. And then we end up with the 4 that jumped, and maybe they might need another action. This one looks like he's having a bit of trouble. We do need to get the frogs off the log and implement the actions that we've decided on. Well, that's been a very quick run through the risk management process, focusing on how we can moderate it or expand it, make a few small changes to think about opportunities as well as threats in a single integrated process. Give you the opportunity to ask some questions. Not all risk is bad. It's important for us to recognize that uncertainty that matters includes upside risk as well as downside risk, uncertainties that could help us as well as uncertainties that could hurt us, uncertainties that could save time and save money and enhance performance, as well as uncertainties that could waste time, waste money, and damage performance. And those upside risks, those positive risks, those opportunities can be found and can be managed. And the risk process that we're using for our threats, with a few small modifications, can be used equally well to manage opportunities. So we could be using a common risk process to minimize threats and maximize opportunities. The reason to do it is because it works. We're trying to minimize threats, maximize opportunities in order to optimize achievement of our objectives. That's the goal. Why would we do it? Because it really helps, because it works. If we have an integrated risk management process that minimizes threats and maximizes opportunities, we don't need to have a separate process for opportunity management. We can just use risk management, which we're currently using for threats, to manage opportunity well. It's more efficient because we're doing 2 things with a single process. we're minimizing threats and maximizing opportunities. It's very motivating for our project teams to have a structured way of finding things that will help us achieve our goals. And that's why we should do it. Not only that, it's also, oh, hang on, it's like slide's just frozen again. Creative. If we're thinking outside the box, thinking of ways that we could improve our likelihood of achieving our goals. If we have a structured approach to opportunity management, it means that fewer opportunities will pass us by. We'll capture more of them and turn them into benefits. And we'll have a more successful project, which ultimately is why we're doing project management and risk management in the first place. They're having an integrated common process for managing threats and opportunities alongside each other. And that's why we should do it. So let me just give you this summary few statements. Risk management can help us find opportunities. They are only the same as threats. They are only uncertainties that matter. They're just positive ones. And by using some of these simple two-dimensional techniques, we can easily find opportunities that may or may not occur, but if they do occur, help us to achieve our goals. Risk management can help us to prioritize those opportunities, to pick the best ones, using probability and impact in the same way that we do for threats. How likely is it to occur and how good might it be? And then plotting those on a double probability impact matrix and picking out the best ones using that traffic light system. And once we've found the good ones, we can make them happen through structured response strategies, through exploiting and capturing opportunities, sharing them with other people who can help us make them happen, enhancing them to make them as good as possible. Or for the ones that we can't do proactive responses for, we can accept them with a contingency plan and then implement our response strategies to get the frogs off the log and get those opportunities, helping our projects to achieve their goal. It's true that life is risky, projects are risky, business is risky, but we can create our own silver linings through a structured, integrated, common risk management process, which deals with opportunities as well as threats. And I would suggest any other type of risk management, which is limited only to threats, is only doing half the job. You're not getting all the benefits out of the risk management process that you could. Risk management is designed to manage risk. Risk includes opportunities as well as threats, which means that risk management is about maximizing opportunities as well as minimizing threats. Now, I mentioned to you there's a couple of resources which you might find handy. A couple of books that I've written. The Capturing Upside Risk book came out in 2020, I think it was. It's a fairly detailed approach to the idea of how to find and manage opportunities, lots of techniques, tips, templates, and so on. And then there's a fully developed methodology called the ATOM methodology, Active Threat and Opportunity Management, which is embodied in this book, Practical Project Risk Management, which I believe is a course tech. And that gives you, again, detailed processes and techniques to step through to make this work in practice. If you want to find more details of these books, then on the Risk Doctor website, under the writing section, you'll find how to get these books. Well, I hope you found that useful. Here are my contact details if you want to be in touch and find out more, if you want to ask me questions outside the session, if you want to follow up on any of these ideas at this point, and give you the opportunity to ask questions. I hope you found it interesting, provocative, stimulating, and ultimately useful. Thank you very much.